It really scares me. Let's work up to it together. So, for most of my life, and I remember quite a bit of it, I've always watched people, um, and I've always tried to figure out what people care about and how people talk to each other, what people say when they talk to each other, why they say it, what motivates them to say what they say, and why they talk in general. Um, and going to something like attraction or hopefully love. Um, I've analyzed, I've talked with people. I don't just watch people, I've talked with people. Um, I've watched a lot more people, but I've talked to a lot of people as well. And I always try to pick up on what conversations are like between people. And I've asked a bunch of people as well, why do you like this person? Or how did y'all, get together? How did y'all connect? And if they're a couple, sometimes I was with somebody else, and then I was talking to them. It was like a double date kind of thing, or I was just talking to just two people that were my friends that were together. And I try to figure out, what do people talk about? What's something that they often talk about? And I've thought about relationships as well, as far as the ones that I've been in. And what do we usually talk about in those relationships? What are some things that constantly come up? What's on our minds together? What do we wonder about? What do we contemplate together? What do we help each other realize? Is there something that we help each other realize? And the more that I watch people, and the more that I analyze my own relationships, and the more that I ask people about these things, I start to get this creeping fear. See, a lot of people seem like they're together because happenstance. Either, pessimistic side, they settled for each other, which unfortunately is what the vast majority of people do. But optimistic side, they found each other because they had some connection over something. They're both interested in something. And they might even talk about that something a lot. And a lot of the time that something is music, movies. I had a professor that talked about how he met his wife. It wasn't just one professor, actually. I had multiple professors talk about it. And people in general actually talk about how, trading songs, recommending songs to each other or listening to each other's songs, making that initial connection. Sometimes it was art. A lot of people, just because what I'm into, it was over like different kinds of paganism, Luciferianism, spirituality, Hinduism, something like that. Initial connection. And then, I listen to these people and I contemplate my own conversations with my relationships and how little of that was about the initial connection, but also how that initial connection didn't actually go deeper. How the ways that people connect, even on spirituality, even on occultism, religion, that all the surface level understanding that they connect on regarding, whatever spiritual or religious lessons, for instance, they didn't grow together. They didn't go deeper. That surface level understanding, not only did that stay the same for each individual, but they didn't grow either together or individually in their understanding. That same religious and spiritual understanding remained the same, and they didn't realize more. They stopped realizing. And maybe that's because I've talked to a lot of people after I got older, after I got in my mid-20s, into my 30s. I'm almost 32 now on October 29th. And, people stop delving deep, stop realizing new things, stop continuing their spiritual journey of understanding, of evolving, of realizing, ooh, I was really wrong about that. Ooh, but this makes more sense. And they just decide, this is what makes sense. These are the lessons. And, people don't do this consciously, but they're like, okay, these are the lessons. Subconsciously, like, okay, I'm good with these lessons. I don't need to go any deeper than this, and I don't need to realize any more than this because this is enough. And, in relationships, I've seen people people with spirituality, or we like to think that we're so much better than other people, but after a certain point, you stop realizing things, and you start getting into the minutia of either religion or spirituality, and you start learning more technical knowledge, like, more definitions and more like history, but you stop enlightening. You stop realizing, and you start memorizing at some point. And it's almost like your spiritual journey turns into a stutter, where you're stuck on the same realization, and then you're stuck on learning one thing. You keep on learning more and more, but you're not realizing more. You're not truly experiencing the knowledge. You're not truly integrating it. And you're not, and while you're having more experiences in your life and interactions with the knowledge on what you learned, you don't realize more. And, even going outside of spirituality, religion, and the occult, people decide how much Christianity is enough for them, or how much religion is enough for them, how much atheism, how much philosophy is enough for them, and then they get satisfied and they don't change, even if it's not spirituality, the occult. Even if you're completely atheist, and maybe you're not even philosophical, or if you're just philosophical and an atheist, this is my definition. This is my philosophy. This is who I am. This is my definition. This is my definition. And then you don't grow. And I am under the perhaps romantic impression that people should enhance each other. They shouldn't try to extract happiness from each other. And what it seems is that we decide what our ideas are. We extract happiness from that. We say, okay, this is our definition for what we've realized. We don't say this consciously, but subconsciously and in actuality, okay, this is what we believe. And we keep on extracting as much definition from that as we can, and then over time, it calcifies, and then we become so rigid that we start forcing that rigidity on other people as we get older, and not growing is bad. But even in even with people, as far as why people connected, let's say there's a personality trait where, you really like this aspect of this person's personality, and the other person really likes that aspect of you. That also calcifies and starts to get annoying. Or you start to get so used to someone that you don't really need to even really talk to them anymore. And a lot of people say, we're in the zone, we don't really need to talk anymore, we're so synced up. But if you're really synced up and you don't need to talk, that there is a connection there, but you're also not growing. You're not becoming more. You're not realizing more together. You're not enhancing each other. You're calcifying together. And you're okay with it. It doesn't make you unhappy. But you're still not realizing more. You're becoming rigid. And, it's not bad to not grow after a certain point. I'm not saying it's bad, but then I start to look at, why are people really drawn to each other originally? And this kind of gets more towards my fear, because, this is kind of a lead up where I was talking about what I just talked about. But sometimes I think that all of that is just the label we put on things. Everything that I just talked, the label that we put on things in order to make ourselves feel deeper, or feel better about the connection that we have with somebody. Because a lot of people, the initial physical attraction, I've even had a lot of therapists say this in the past, and I've had friends say this, and I've had family say this. The initial physical attraction is what gets you interested in that person. It's what gets you to talk to them. It's what gets you, get to know them, and what made you talk to them. And then, people exchange niceties. People reply to each other and like, and then we decide mentally as human beings, I mean, I would have sex with this person and they're okay. I'd get to know them better. And then we go through this courtship thing where, we talk to each other more. We're like, oh, okay. I mean, doing more and more exchanges, and you're like, okay, I like this about this person. That's kind of weird or whatever. Or that's not something that's a big deal. I don't really like that. But you start making more and more connections and start making these initial lines into each other's minds. And you start making compromises. Not necessarily compromise like, I'm this person, so but I'll put up with this. Not necessarily that, but you start making connections and stop seeing how it's all very baseline. In making those connections through social niceties and conversation, at some point we stop understanding or realizing that we're not making deep connections. We're just making connections. And maybe deep connections don't matter, but this is going to get into my fear. We start making these connections and it's just all surface level, but there's a whole bunch of surface level connections. So we start getting tight. We start getting really connected to each other. And we're like, okay, at some point you're like, okay, I put all this effort into this person. This can be male or female. This is not either or. And, this isn't a particular kind of person, religious or spiritual or atheist or conservative, liberal. I've seen this with all people. You start making all those surface level connections. And then at some point you're so connected to this person that, every now and then, you get into a relationship with this person. And by the way, people repeat themselves a lot as far as what they care about and as far as like what they think that they've realized. People think in loops again, and again. Say similar things. Talk about the same experiences that they've had that they've talked about before. They get in mental loops. But when you get into a relationship with somebody, after a while, every now and then you might ask a deep question, or you might talk to each other late at night and talk about, what do you think about this or that? It's always like late at night, or it's always like when you're like cuddling, and then like these deeper questions sometimes pop up. But once you get each other's understanding on that, after a while, those deeper questions stop. You start caring more about what's happening in the world, politics, or what's happening with your favorite artists, or society, or a new law. And those deeper questions, every now and then they might pop out, but then those other baseline connections and those baseline interactions on baseline things are what keep on making those surface level connections. And the deeper stuff fades away. And people stop asking each other about the deeper stuff as time goes on. And because the normality of the surface level connections becomes so normal that it's almost like nothing deeper exists. So what leading into my fear is I'm afraid that we lie to ourselves about why we're with somebody, and that it is physical. And, we justify that it was that original connection, became something deeper, led to something deeper, or was deeper initially. But really, these are justifications to our intellect for what our bodies, our urges wanted. And that viewing relationships and how they don't talk about deep things, how people don't talk about deep things, and how those relationships don't really deepen over time, it kind of proves this. And another thing that scares me that might kind of works towards my point here, and I don't like this point, this is what scares me, is that people talk at each other way more than they talk to each other. People often wait for their turn to talk, their turn to say about their experience, or their turn to give their reaction to something, rather than actually wanting to hear what somebody has to say. And over time, while you might emotionally want to hear what somebody has to say as far as feedback, like where do you want to go to eat, or how did this make you feel? As far as like deeply spiritually, or even deeply emotionally, or deeply intellectually, those caring about what your partner feels is more about maintaining the connection, the overall connection, and then the interactions on those, checking your partner's pulse, is always making those surface level connections. And to be honest, I'm scared that I'm scared that I'm alone here. I'm scared that that there's not other people who actually care about deep things. Because I've talked to a lot of people, and there's a lot of people who act like they're concerned for me, or and a lot of them think, a lot of them want to be good people. Some of them just want to get in my pants, male and female. So they act concerned, or they choose to put aside more time for me for that, even if they're caring. They choose to put aside more time because they want that. I'm afraid that people want things from each other and they don't want the person. And in order to get what they want from somebody else, whether it be for the body or security of some kind or comfort, whatever it is, in order to get that, they make concessions on the surface level. And people don't really care about each other's depth. And people don't make deep connections, at least enough of the time, to make us a human race that really thinks, rather than imagining that we think, rather than telling ourselves that we think. I'm scared that people's connections, that they're all bullshit, and they're all instinctual, and they're all surface level, and that we're telling ourselves that we're thinking. Maybe, this might even be true of me. I want to connect with somebody more deeply, but then I ask myself, why was I interested in this woman? Why was I interested in her? Did I just want to and why did I keep on having conversation with her? Then in my head later on I realized I just wanted to have sex with her, or she was deep enough to where I wanted to learn more. But then at a certain point I was like, oh wow, this person's really not interesting. But I kept on talking because I wanted to be nice, or I wanted to maybe not be alone. But I've never been impressed by anyone, and that scares me. It's not because I'm great, because I don't think that I'm great. I've never been impressed by anyone, and that scares me, because the deeper I get with someone else, once I realize I might just be attracted to somebody's body, I might still keep on talking to them, or I might just talk to them out of compassion, or I might talk to them because maybe I'm hoping to dig something, something deeper out of this person, but like make a deeper connection, or maybe this person is more interesting as far as how they think and the deeper things that they think about, but then it has never happened. And that scares me. I'm scared that even if I end up settling, that I will never make a deeper connection with someone. And maybe there's not that many people to make that connection with. And that scares me. And I don't even know why it scares me. I really don't. I wish I did. I don't want to be better than I am, and I don't want to think of myself in a high-minded way. There's got to be more than this, man. There's got to be more than what we talk about and care about most of the time. And if there's not, then maybe our self-awareness is just a facade. Maybe our intellect is just a cloak for our desire. And maybe I have very little doubt that soul exists, that there's deeper nature to things. But maybe humanity has not moved far enough to where we've gotten close at all, the vast majority of people. And maybe we're just not there yet for me to find somebody like that. And that scares me, terrifies me. And I might get messages from people talking about how, they're deep, or they have actually cared, but people just want things from each other. And I don't know what to do. I honestly don't. And that scares me.